going to take some questions.
Hi, I'm Aisha Mian. I'm from Students of Sensible Drug Policy, the UK side. Thank you for your amazing talk. It was really cool. I wanted to ask you a bit about your comment on getting out of the closet, because I know you kind of mentioned this. You were like, okay, where are the colored folk? And, you know, I feel like I go along to these kind of things a lot of the time, and I'm like, where are the colored folk? You know, I'm the only one there a lot of the time too. I'm like, you know, where are the younger people as well? Thankfully, we have some SSDP representation here today. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, and also I know David is going to be speaking a little bit more about the LGBT community, and I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about getting people from, like, even more marginalized communities to, like, how can they come out of the closet? I mean, like, I know for me, myself, I mean, like, it'd be it's extremely difficult coming from my culture, coming from my background, to openly say things like this, you know? And obviously I should be considering what I'm doing. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, like, we're like even more marginalized because of the other kind of factors that we have. And on top of that, you know, there's the drugs thing as well. So it's like, how would you say we can deal with this?
Thank you for that question. That's a really important and difficult one to answer. You know, on the one hand, you pointed out that people from marginalized groups are already marginalized. And so that makes it difficult for them to, the Japanese have a saying that, you know, the nail that sticks up is the one that gets whacked. And so the people who are from marginalized communities, they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be whacked because they have this history of that. And more importantly, but you can get them out of the closet and you can get them to be more vocal if they had representatives, for example, who were also appropriately vocal and honest. One of the things that happens certainly in the black community is that we have these idiots, not all, but some people who talk about drugs and they're wrong. And so you need people who know what they're talking about out front and then calling people out. And then you give other people space, room to fit in there. But right now they don't see any room and all they see is punishment. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to lead the way and we have to show people that there is space for you, not only the folks with this limited or idiotic sort of perspective. In fact, let me show you why that perspective is limited and idiotic. And then hopefully those people who have that limited perspective would be embarrassed and not be so vocal in the future. And hopefully that provides room for folks.
Hi, I work in a criminal justice agency in Leicester in the Midlands, and it's going back to your point about cocaine and crack cocaine. And we have to work with a horrible payment by results. If you take cocaine, you, once a fortnight, for example, you are a success, full completion, or you could be, and you get payment by results. If you take crack cocaine once a fortnight, you're not deemed a success, and you're deemed to be bad, dangerous, and crazy, and you don't get the success for that, but they're the same drug. How, in my field, I've tried to challenge this quite a lot of times, and it's a commissioning thing, and it falls on deaf. It's like talking to the wall. How would you advise to challenge more effectively on that?
Again, you guys are asking all the great questions. That's a difficult one. One of the ways, first of all, I have to say, you will engage in conversation with people who are just disingenuous, and they're not going to hear anything you say. I would advise you, if you want to live a long, healthy life, not to do that. That's number one. So you need to make sure that the people that you're in conversation with, that you guys agree on some simple, basic ground rules. Evidence is important in this conversation. That's number one. And if you get people agreeing on that sort of basic level, now you can provide some evidence that can be compelling, or at least they could evaluate. And that's all we can do. And we can be dogged with that sort of thing. As Pat said earlier this morning, I think he correctly said, the world is changing. The world around drug policy is changing. In the United States, of all places, it's no longer acceptable to have that dogmatic view because you will be called out and you will be embarrassed. I think that it will eventually come here. I find it really, I'm amazed that I'm even saying this. It's like something in the United States will come here. I don't know if we've ever said that besides war. But that's.
Well, thank goodness you came.
Yeah, so I think eventually they will have to play by the ground rules of evidence. But you must be ready to have the best available evidence, and you must be ready to be sharp, and you must be ready to be smart, thoughtful about that, because we all know we have some teammates who are not those things I just listed. And with teammates like that, we don't need opponents.
We know that crack cocaine and amphetamine and methamphetamine have either the exact or hugely similar compounds. And we know that as drug specialists, anything that crosses the blood-brain barrier quickly becomes more Moorish or has more physical addictive qualities. But how can we explain, you know, the other things like the huge deterioration in physical appearance, you know, over a short period of time, you know, the more crime to fund, the more manic use as opposed to more recreational use with amphetamine and crack cocaine, if they're exactly the same compounds? So
you made some assumptions that were not exactly true, but that's okay because I think many of us have them, and I'm glad you raised those issues. So when we think about crack cocaine or cocaine and amphetamines, they're not the same. They have actions on monoamine neurotransmitters, and some people have distilled it down to thinking that they are like the same because they increase dopamine and norepinephrine. Stress does that too. Anxiety does that too. So a number of, they're not the same, so please don't take that assumption. And then you also said something about the faster a drug hits the brain, the more Moorish, I love that word, by the way, Moorish, the more Moorish people become. That's a theory. That's a theory that we operate under in drug abuse science. But when you go to the literature, you try and look at the papers or look for papers that have compared routes of administration, some simple study, oral route versus intravenous versus smoked versus intranasal, to see if you actually get this more Moorish behavior in the lab. There are no data out there that says this. And then if you think about this fact too, me, as I become older, I much prefer to use drugs via the oral route because they last longer if I'm at a party or something. I don't have to continue to dose. A variety of reasons that make the oral route a lot better for me than smoking or intravenous. And so as we think about those kinds of things, you have to think about your population and the person you're talking about. And the people you're talking about, particularly when you talk about physical deterioration, you have to look at other things going on in their environment. How well do they take care of their personal health even if they were not using drugs? How well are they taking care of their dental sort of work, their nutrition? All of these things are critically important. How well are they sleeping? Were they doing these things before they used the drugs? And so what you're probably seeing is a non-pharmacological effect that you're attributing to pharmacology. Because, again, the majority of people who use these drugs don't have those problems. But some do, as you point out. But when that happens, it begs you to look beyond the drugs and to these other sort of factors.
Thank you.
Okay.